aromatic whites
Yep.
dealkalize very well. It's much easier for us to capture that essence and develop products that are very closely aligned to their alcohol counterpart.
Hey guys, welcome to the Wine, Whiskey and Wheat Show. I have Kayla Winter here from Bev Zero. She takes care of the technical side of things and especially, the winemaking, pretty much leading the winemaking side of things, at Bev Zero. So we're really going to deep dive into the process of making non-alcoholic wines and also non-alcoholic beverages. So Kayla, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sid. Happy to be here.
Super. So let's jump in, how you got started and a little bit of backstory about your career, please, on your journey. Just walk us through what have you been doing?
Sure. So I started working in wine when I was 16, born and raised in Sonoma County. So it was just very much a part of my life here. I definitely knew I wanted to be a winemaker early at a young age. Decided to go learn how to make wine out in Ithaca, New York at Cornell University.
Beautiful area.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I also figured, hey, if I can learn how to make wine in the snow and in, pretty rough conditions, I think I can do pretty well back home here in, Sonoma, Napa. So that was a great experience. Came back, worked in traditional winemaking for several years. And then I just felt like I wasn't finding a position that was as innovative as I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And when the opportunity came up with Bev Zero to grow and pretty much kind of put their non-alcoholic wine program on the map, I jumped at it. And so that was in 2019. And I've been a winemaker and director of winemaking since.
Nice. Did you have to study a particular course at any university for this process, or it was internal learning you did?
Definitely internal learning. But there was also, so back in 2019, the US market really only had a couple non-alc wines out there. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of knowledge that I could gain from talking to our international facilities where, mm-hmm. Especially in Europe, that the non-alcoholic beverage industry is much more mature out there. But for the most part, it was either learning from colleagues or learning by figuring it out on my own.
Nice.
And so a huge portion of this was not only learning how to develop better products with our process, but also developing supply chains. Given that there were hardly any non-alc wines on the market, my clients that we were working with, they didn't know where to take it to get it packaged or what government agencies they needed to work with. And so, mm-hmm. We helped them figure all that out so that they could get to market faster. And of course, we could, get more throughput in our cellar.
I think, we were just chatting that this category is, out of, I guess I can't say out of nowhere because it's a slow, work in progress. And you just said it, like it's been almost 8 to 9 years, but it's literally last 12 months have been, really that it's going to stay. It's not just something which, is a temporary pop. I think this is a very serious category. It's time where Walmart is dedicating a shelf space, right? So it's happening now, like by Total Wine, Bevmos of the world, all are jumping and putting a serious attention for 2023 plans. And even the sommeliers and bartenders, which I've been chatting with, are really updating their wine list. So it's getting its final, engraving, I would say, finally. So I think let's jump on the category. We all know that this is a growing category. I really want to go deeper into what exactly is growing in the category. So, I just read an article somewhere that non-alcoholic wines are not growing that fast as other non-alcoholic beverages, or maybe it's just a hard process to make a non-alcoholic wine, Yes. or so on. So maybe if you can break us through which categories are really expected to grow, where are the opportunities, where you see more demand coming in, from the retail end, so our producers can sort of get value in making those SKUs.
Sure. Yes. Non-alcoholic wine is growing at a slower rate than, beer and spirits. And there are several factors for that. A large one is the fact that it is so much harder to make a non-alcoholic wine taste like an alcoholic wine with So with beer, for example, you're starting off with a product that's only 5 to 7% alcohol, and you're removing a very small overall portion of that product. With wine, you're removing a greater portion, and it really does alter the flavor profile. We do a lot of work in making sure that it does still taste like wine. It's just, it tastes like wine that's a little different than what you're used to. And we've seen a lot of consumer interest in non-alc wine. In fact, when I speak to the top non-alcoholic retailers that are online, so like Boisson and Better Roads, wine is their fastest moving product, hands down. But wine has yet to really kind of find its stride in larger supermarket retail chains and in distribution.
What's moving in wine? Like, is it Prosecco's or the sparkling? What's really, moving in the wine?
Sparkling for sure is very popular. The bubbles really do kind of provide that mouthfeel experience that a lot of people are looking for in non-alc wine. But red as well. And so it's interesting because red is the hardest to get right, essentially, but it's what consumers want the most. And so when there's a good red that hits the shelves, I hear from our retailing partners that they can't keep it on the shelf. It's one of the top selling products. So definitely bubbles and red. And then also what's really interesting is premium products are moving a lot faster on these kind of online markets. Premium being, and of course, this is all new. So for a non-alcoholic, premium would be like $20 to $30 a bottle. Those tend to be top sellers for a lot of these online retailers. But of course, if we're going to see a huge area of growth in national distribution, typically those are more affordable SKUs. And so I think we can see when you're asking, what's growth, what's next for non-alc wine, I see growth on both ends of the spectrum. I think there are sommeliers and restaurants and high-end retailers that are asking for higher priced, more premium products that actually do have a story with, vineyard designates and lesser known varietals. But I also see on the other side of things, people want more higher quality, affordable brands that are going to be in a Target or a Trader Joe's or something like that. So huge opportunities for growth on both ends, which is great for brands because either you can, pick one to focus on, or what we see a lot of brands doing now is, have different tiers of products so that you can basically fit all of those consumer needs.
What my mind says is usually, the Pinot Grigio or the, Pinot Noir kind of health conscious, a young 25 to 35, 40, age group usually preferred this Merlot sort of varietals, not the cab people, right? The lighter wines are, is it correct that is the target audience? It's better to make a Pinot Noir non-alcoholic than going heavy cab?
I don't think there is enough diversity on the market right now to really say that consumers are choosing wine varietals specifically based on, what they tend to consume in traditional wine. There's not that many out there. So usually if you're interested in non-alc wine, you look at the list, and then sure, if you're really into Sauvignon Blanc, you might pick some Sauvignon Blancs, but there's only a few. So then, what do you move on to next? But I do think we're going to see more of that in the future. So one thing that is very interesting is, aromatic whites dealkalize very well. It's much easier for us to capture that essence and develop products that are very closely aligned to their alcohol counterpart. And aromatic whites, you think of like Gewürztraminer, Viognier, Muscat as well. We don't see a lot of folks gravitating towards those because they're kind of trying to stick to the classic, Chardonnay, Cab wines. So there's a huge opportunity in that I think is somewhat untapped.
What about spirits? Do you do that as well, or just focused on the wine?
We don't dealcoholize spirits. We can.
Sure.
When you have, a product at 50-60% alcohol and you remove the alcohol, you're really not left with much volume. And so, yes, it's possible. It tends to not be as efficient and lucrative as it would be for what most of these spirit companies are doing, which is just taking a water base, distilling botanicals in various flavors and adding them to it. It's a much cheaper way and faster way to make the product. But we have worked with some folks on kind of non-alcoholic wine-based cocktails.
Yep.
The ones that we're currently working on have yet to hit the market, so I can't speak too much about them, but that is another area I think that we're going to see a lot of growth in, because with all of these products, there are no rules right now.
Yeah, yes, that's the thing. Like, I was just going to say that it opens up so many different avenues, like 7-Elevens of the world, or the wherever you can't legally sell, you can, have the brand at least there. It can act as an advertising as well, where alcohol ads not allowed, for example. You can just show that, as well.
Sure.
There are many angles big brands are using this, to jump in.
Exactly. You can sell it in so many more places, you can advertise it and do all that. But also, like, the consumers who are attracted to these products are already, starting out with an open mind, right? They want something new and different. And so they're not, yes, we are kind of in a parallel movement along with the alcohol counterparts that we're working with. However, if you do something completely out of the box, it's not unlikely that a consumer would say, that looks interesting, I want to try it, as opposed to, that's unfamiliar, I'm not sure I want to try that. Because we see that a lot in the, traditional spaces, that's why we see so many cabs and Chardonnays or on the market, because they know that's what sells and people feel comfortable with that. This is really an opportunity to go outside the box, find something totally new and different, and see what consumers say about it. If the product tastes good, if it's healthy, or at least healthier than, the alcoholic counterparts, and you have good branding and marketing, then we see a lot of success stories with interesting products.
Have you got enough like little bit of data where you've seen that usually it's the first time drinker that is on that category, or it is someone who's just having dry January month, or maybe I just don't want to I have to drive tonight. It's usually a utility use, and then you don't get a repeat order from that customer because now they're back to their whatever they were doing. It's just maybe that particular moment they choose that, let me not put alcohol in my body.
Yeah, there was a recent article that just came out. Links is a new kind of consumer insight platform, and they did a study recently and found that there is 65% greater interest in non-alcoholic products from people who have participated in dry January compared to those who have not. So, you can extrapolate a few things from that, but what I see is consumers who have tried a dry month and tried mindful drinking and abstaining, maybe not entirely, but just for a short period of time, they clearly have a positive experience from it because they're continuing to engage in alternative products and drinking less, essentially. So that was a really interesting piece of data, but I definitely do see the majority of the market is not complete abstainers. It is primarily folks who are just trying to drink less, trying to have more mindful experiences.
Got it.
I think I do have more data on that I can pull up here, but it wouldn't be as big of a movement as it is today if it was just consumers who were entirely sober, because that's a somewhat small subset of our society. And so the reason why we're seeing so much growth is because there is a overall society.
So there is a palate development happening there. There is people getting used to this taste and pretty much the whole category.
Absolutely.
Let's go on the business of this. Kayla, I want to understand one basic question: is the cost to make wine more compared to a normal wine?
It is.
Okay.
Real quick, I found that that data point, 82% of non-alc buyers also purchase alcohol. That was from a Nielsen study in 2022. So throwing that out there. But okay, yes. So this is very interesting topic. When you're talking about non-alcoholic wine, when I say that, I'm talking about de-alcoholized wine, not
like less than 5%, I mean, right?
Yes, less than 0.5%. So to do that, you have to start off with a alcoholic wine that is undergone fermentation, that has those complex flavors and the chemistry that you get from fermentation. Remove the alcohol and then package it and ship it around the different facilities, because we don't have packaging capabilities here. So there are all these extra steps, right? So all of the resources and time and energy that goes into making a wine, that is included in the products that are on the market.
So it's a lot more. I mean, it's a really additional, like for a $6 Merlot, another SKU that just becomes $10. It's a big difference.
Exactly. And so a huge part of the growth that we're seeing is because folks like us and brands themselves are educating consumers on the fact that this is not something that you're drinking because it's less than, right? You're not, you shouldn't be approaching a non-alcoholic wine and saying it's inferior, or it's less exciting, less effort than an alcoholic wine, and that's why I'm drinking it, right? Most of the consumers that we're seeing are choosing these products because they want an elevated experience without the alcohol. And so we just have to continue to educate everyone, but consumers in particular, that, as with any premium product, as with any specially curated product, there is a greater cost associated with it. And that is the way you need to look at these products as well. And as I said, we're seeing premium grow, so that's working.
That looks like a big bottleneck for the distillers and wineries to get into the game, because it's the commerce is still not supporting. Like the retailers have to make more money, wineries have to make more money. It has to be a cheaper alternate. If there was a cost saving involved, then people would get faster on board.
Yes. Sure.
So let's go on the process, right? Especially for the current winery, what are the ways they can introduce this into their facility? I'm sure they have, one option is to work with you guys, so you can lay that out as well. But one is completely internal process. What can they do? What do they need to buy? What is the investments, needed to launch a new SKU?
Right off the bat, you need some way to remove alcohol. And that's where we come in. So we use, depending on the facility, and we do have a facility here in California, South Africa, and one in Spain. We use vacuum distillation. So here in the US, we have spinning cone columns that will basically lower the boiling point of ethanol by putting it under a vacuum.
Sorry, one stop there. So the wine has to be shipped to your facility first?
Yes, if you're using us as a processor, yes.
And if not, can your technology go to the winery? Like, I did not understand
technology.
Where does this process happen?
So yes, so the two options is you buy your own equipment, and we do sell technology for deacquisition. It is a large expenditure. It's definitely not like, I know there's a fair amount of pieces of equipment that you can buy in beer that are like, several $1,000s, and it runs a very small amount. The technology that we have is certainly an investment and would require a much larger throughput to make it worthwhile for a winery. So that's an option. But if, on your way to that, while you're trying to grow, you can utilize our services. So yes, in that case, you would, the client would ship wine to BevZero. We would remove the alcohol to the desired degree. It could be non-alcoholic, but it also could be a low alcohol product. And we do quite a bit of that as well. And then we ship the product to the desired co-packer. It could be back to that winery if they have their own packaging capabilities, or it could be to one of our partner packagers. And then once it's packaged, of course, then it goes into various modes of distribution.
And this happens in FlexiTank?
Yeah, it can be a tanker truck. It can be a tote.
Okay.
Our smallest machine here at Bev Zero can run 120 gallons. So,
So it
there
can
are,
be a small batch run as well, which they want to
sure.
start with.
Yeah, we can do small test launches. You do 500 gallons, put it on the market, see what happens. But we can also scale up. If we're running full steam ahead, we can run about 1,300 gallons an hour. And
what sort of timelines, let's say someone shipped you the wine, how much time does the process take before you ship them back?
A few days.
That's it?
That's it. Mostly because we hold it up for a day for doing QC checks and making sure everything, alcohols are correct and SO2 levels are what their client is requesting. So depending on the size of the lot, we process it within, a day or half a day, and then we ship out the next.
And sorry, you were explaining the process. So now let's, basically, how does the aromas get removed? How does the alcohol get removed? What are the steps in that?
So with this technology, we're doing a few things to the product to allow us to extract alcohol without what you would be considered, boiling the product and ruining it. So, if you're making brandy, for example, you put wine on a pot still or a cash still, and all you want is the alcohol that comes off. What's left just gets cooked, and it's not a very, desirable product, and that usually gets dumped. So obviously we want both fractions. So we're using technology that is much gentler and allows kind of less of that cooked aroma and destruction of the wine when we're processing. So the technology does that in three ways. First is putting it under a vacuum. So by doing that, you decrease the boiling point of ethanol so that you only have to add a small amount of heat. It's like 100 to maybe 110 degrees in our column. You can actually walk up to the machine and touch it, and it's not going to burn you. So that is one of the keys there, but then also creating a thin film to increase extraction is part of the process. And then there is a stripping vapor. So we pull a very small portion of the wine, heat it. We do boil that under atmospheric conditions. And then we introduce that on the bottom of the still, and that basically helps extract further molecules as it rises. There are a few YouTube videos if you want to see like a schematic that probably is much better at explaining it than I did. So you can find that on Bev Zero's YouTube.
I saw one video of one of the Australian winemakers I was just chatting with. He had an actual video that first step was removing aromas. And then again, the second step was removing alcohol.
Correct. Yes. Thank you for reminding me to touch on that part.
And then adding back the aromas so that, the sensory parts come back.
Yes. So we have determined that the majority of the aromatics of the wine are within the first 1% of the distillate we pull off. So we actually do what we call an essence strip first, and we pull off 1% distillate. We set that aside, as you mentioned. Then we do the dealcoholization down to whatever set point is requested, and then add that essence back. So when we're talking about non-alcoholic wine, we'll actually dealcoholize down to maybe 0.2, 0.3%, and then add the essence back up to 0.5 or just under 0.5 for the client.
And what about like spirits? Is the same sort of, the cost just goes up, as well there because of this whole process, or, it depends on the percentage of alcohol, like beer maybe just has 4%. So maybe it's cheaper because it can be just a few hours. I don't know. I'm just, illiterate
These are
in
great
this.
questions. Great questions. So yes, for spirits, it is a slightly different process, and we're pulling much more. So, when we do costing, it's usually based on the product itself. There's a wide variability within spirits and what, clients send us. So if that is something that you're interested in, please contact us and we can talk about it. But for the most part, when we're talking about wine and cider, usually the same pricing, similar process. For beer, we actually work with partner facilities that are housing the GOLO units, which is the dealcoholization technology that we sell. So we work with Barrel Brothers and a handful of other breweries who are housing the units. And basically, we do offer product development for beer, but when it comes to the production, it's all happening at one facility, which is the best way to process the beverages without having, trucking steps and things. And especially with beer, since it's very, very sensitive to oxidation, that could be a concern. So we've built out that program slightly different than we do with wine.
What can go wrong? Where have you seen, especially when people are trying themselves, what have you seen gone wrong? The wine itself, I guess.
A lot. So the one thing to really consider here is when you have alcohol removed wine, especially down to like less than maybe 2 or 3%, you have a beverage with the complexity and molecular structure of wine. It is slightly different because ethanol is removed, but for the most part, the majority of the sensitivities of wine remain. So you still have to deal with, colloid stability and oxidation and sulfur and things like that. But you also now have a product that has no alcohol in it and is as susceptible to a wide variety of microbes as a juice or a soda. The pH of wine the pH of non-alcoholic wine is very similar to the pH of alcoholic wine. So that does eliminate quite a few, pathogens. And so the food safety is slightly less of a concern, but in terms of, quality control, we have seen a lot of things go wrong with re-fermentations and microbial contamination. So in terms of production, once the alcohol is removed, there needs to be a very quick and concise production chain into bottle within a week, maybe 2 weeks. So it requires, various filtration methods. A lot of our clients are adding Velcorin. Some are adding soda preservatives, sterile filtration in line to packaging. All of these concerns, it's not impossible. And if done right, there really shouldn't be any issues. But of course, in the real world, things always come up. So,
the shelf lives get affected as well. Like let's say 20, like some wine like Yellowtail usually is good for like 2-3 years, for example, just to,
Sure.
it's a drink now wine. So
Yes.
if you do this kind of process, does that get affected as well?
Yes, these are definitely drink now wines. I would say it's best to consume a product within 6 months.
So that means the vintage sort of wines is also not the market you would want to play with.
Well, not
Like
necessarily.
the cask wines,
Yeah, no one is saying, purchase my wine and cellar it for 10 years here. But there are, depending on the way you make your products, there actually can be quite a bit of translation of expression of the wine from, alcoholic to non-alcoholic. And so vintage does, play a part there. And if you have if we're for clients that are looking at doing appellation or vineyard designates, the vintage differences that you see in that vineyard can carry over through the dealcoholization process. So that aside, yes, in general, these are kind of drink now products. Clients are putting 1 to 2 year shelf life on there because it's not a microbial concern, but if you're the wine is going to age. And then if you add any natural flavors, which a fair amount of products do, those flavors are interacting with the wine as well. And so you will see some evolution within bottle of the flavor profile.
Let's go a little bit on the consumer side, right? Like, how do you know that it's a good product? Like, for example, when you are drinking wine, it's the same sort of thing. Like when, that it's corked or, what kind of things are there? 3 to 4 things that you think that, okay, this is not a bad product.
My answer is that there is no answer right now. So
are there like, if how we evaluate and do competitions and judge a wine,
Yes.
like that, are there any criteria that sommeliers or bartenders professionally actually see that, okay, this is a great non-alcoholic product?
Yes and no. So yeah, as you mentioned, there is an entire lexicon and kind of structure for evaluating alcoholic wine that humans have been developing for centuries. We do not have that in non-alc. So to one person, and even like two sommeliers that are, same level, classically trained, they could have very different ideas of what a good non-alcoholic wine is. And same for, within the wine industry. I mean, you can have like a barefoot drinker, and then you can have a high-end Lafite Rothschild drinker, right? They're going to have very different ideas of what quality is. And so right now it's just so across the board. I know what I like and don't like, and so does every other consumer. And I think it's a struggle, but it's also kind of refreshing because the products are evaluated in a much more simple way, as opposed to trying to compare to, when you consume wine, it's very hard not to think of it as, okay, is this a high-end wine, right? Like when folks do blind tastings and that there's like one $5 bottle in there, and you don't want to be the one that says that's the nice wine, right?
Yeah.
But that's all, mental and societal pressures there. Whereas with these non-alcoholic products, who's to say what's great? It's all your own personal opinion. So I find that refreshing, but I know that can be frustrating for the higher end sommeliers and wineries and winemakers and retailers that are like, how do we justify a price point, or how do we say, compare this is better than the other? And there are a lot of non-alcoholic competitions, and a fair amount of wine competitions are adding a non-alcoholic level and kind of in the competition. How they're evaluating them, I don't know. So I think we'll see that over the next decade. That's definitely going to come to shape.
Some practical takeaways that you would advise wineries to take when they're approaching this whole category, right? Like, I think it's time where something is happening, and everyone, especially the big players. Like, I just saw that you started a white label service with O'Neill, I believe, right?
We're working with Summerlin Wine Brands.
Summerlin, sorry, my bad. But I think big co-packers are jumping on board. Big retail chains are jumping on board. Somewhere, I think wineries need to pay attention to this category for sure. So, what is your advice on what should be in their business plan? The first thing to consider, and then the second, and how shall they start planning and thinking about it? Like, just 3 or 4 bullet points about get this right before you even start.
I think one of the main things is wineries need to make sure they have a good understanding of the regulations on these products. They're FDA.
I thought there were no regulations.
No, they're food products, and so the same regulations that you have, for a juice or a soda, a lot of those apply to these. So you need nutritional panels, you need ingredients lists. There are just various considerations there. But what I see happen quite often is a winery will call the TTB and say, "Hey, do I need a cola for my non-alc wine?" And the TTB will say yes, but that's not a TTB question because it's not a TTB product. But so I always tell people, first of all, know the regulation body that you need to be working with. These are FDA products. Then ask that body of the government body what the answers are to your questions. So TTB is going to give you an answer regardless of whether it's their jurisdiction or not. And so, if you ask the FDA, do I need a cola? They're going to say, of course not. This is a food product. This is not an alcoholic product. So that's probably, one of the biggest considerations that I think people really need to make sure that they understand. But beyond that, what's interesting is because these products, they don't have a standard lexicon and a standard of identity in terms of what is quality, what consumers are looking for. We've made it very easy here at BevZero to do small trials and to just kind of dip your toe into this process. So what I would recommend is if you're interested in this, but you want to know, what your particular customers are interested in, do a couple small batches, put it in your tasting room, trial it, get feedback, see what they want and what they like. And I know that it's going to be different from winery to winery. Everyone has their own style and their own opinion on wine quality and their preferences. So that's what I would say is don't feel like you need to start off with a, huge national brand. That's great. And of course, a lot of people want to get there, but just start trialing it, see what your consumers think, see what feedback they have. And that'll help you develop a plan to put a product in place that's going to be more successful than just trying to shoot in the dark.
So let's say they start with you, a little bit small batch, and then there's a time where, the scale out grows and then it makes sense to invest, You said it's high, so I'm just throwing a number here to get an idea. So let's say it's 200,000. I don't know, for example.
The equipment.
Yeah.
Depending on the size of the machine, you're looking definitely 3 or 4 times that.
Okay, so let's say it's $1 million,
Sure.
for example, to start a whole non-alcoholic processing plant, right? So which means technically, to like you need a $5 million sales plan. I mean, against that sort of investment, right?
Yes, something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not.
So that's
small.
Understood. That's like capital. And then what about the technical capabilities? Do I need to hire a technical winemaker like you, or people can they don't need to add any specialist or lab person or someone overseeing this entire thing, or you think it's manageable?
There's going to be a learning curve with the products, with the machines. So depending on the capacity of your team,
Understood.
yes, you could train.
So you rather hire and save on the learning curve, or you make mistakes and lose money there?
Yes. So no, yes, if you want to hire BevZero to help, consult on project management, product development, we're here for that. I do have a handful of clients that want to do it on their own. And yes, they haven't hired us, but they might call me and say, I can't figure out this, mouthfeel. I don't know what I'm doing. Do you have any tips? And of course, we're more than willing to give them some ideas and resources, because at the end of the day, the category success is our success, and we want to boost everyone around us. High tides raise all boats, that kind of thing.
I think there will be a point where, let's say, Summerland is selling 10 SKUs to Target, for example, right? And then maybe Target says, okay, we're going to cut down 2 SKUs and we're going to add 2 non-alcoholic. So they rather some other vendor coming in, Summerland's going to say, hey, hang on, I can do this as well. So I think somehow the big guys will have to start looking at this, because they don't want to lose the shelf placements or relationships with the big retailers.
Yeah, exactly. Because the price point is higher for non-alc wine, it does make sense for larger distributors and retailers to have their own products. With Summerland, we actually, Summerland has developed a few control brands that are available still for anyone who's interested in just, buying a finished product all the way through and putting it on the shelf. And then, of course, your margins are going to be
one quick question. So that means there is no 3-tier law here, right? Like a distributor can own a private label and get their thing going as well.
Yep.
Nice. That's a good one.
No,
Retailers can.
It's actually, it's scary for a lot of people because they are used to wine.
I think retailers will own that category technically, not the suppliers, if there is no 3-tier.
Yeah, it literally the entire distribution system is busted wide open when you're talking non-alc. And so there is a lot more that's possible. We do see some states kind of struggle with setting up legislation for non-alc, because they're like, well, is it wine? Is it not? What do we do with it? But in general, yes, it is much easier to sell non-alcoholic products than it is wine. And you don't have to deal with, of course, for distributors, yes, you can own your own products. But for brands, we tell them you don't have to work with 3-tier distributors that are going to take a much higher cut than, food distributors. And so you can sell direct to, you can do wholesale.
Imagine Cisco selling your wine now. Wow. Boom. Everywhere. For example, I mean, I'm sure this may be playing up as well, that if you're calling non-alcoholic wine, but you can't call wine then, otherwise it goes to the 3-tier. Is there conversations happening around, you can use the word wine, beer, or spirits. If you use that, then it's something to do with the alcohol system.
Right now, and when looking at the legislation, you can call non-alcoholic wine, and same for beer and all of that. There are countries where that's not the case. And so that can be really tricky. Like in Italy, for example, they're really struggling with that right now. But at the same time, like what we see from the cannabis industry, you can't use the word wine there, but if you put it in a wine bottle, everyone knows what it is, right? And so there are definitely ways around it. But where I really see kind of an issue is like for online advertising, for example, like on platforms where you can't advertise alcohol, like LinkedIn, you know, we have people saying non-alcoholic or, you know, NA wine, and it's getting flagged and reported because it has the word alcohol or the word wine. And so, yes, there are some growing pains there, but in general, we haven't seen too many issues with that kind of, small detail.
So any closing remarks, Kayla?
Just that I think this category is extremely exciting. It's not as scary as you think. So I'm speaking directly to winemakers right now. It's not as scary as you think. It's fun. It's innovative. It is a category in which you can kind of flex your creativity. I've enjoyed this process so much in my 3 years here at BevZero. Reach out to us if you need any help. We're here. We're happy to work with you. And also we're going to be at the IBWSS and Cannabis Drinks Expo, and we'll be exhibiting. So please come and meet us, and we're excited to participate.